Okay, welcome everybody to this amazing talk, Founder Talks. Today we have Raahish Kalaria, who is a serial entrepreneur, UVA student, and he's going to be talking to us about managing OKRs for startup teams, or the alternative title in on here. So with that, Raahish, go for it.
Yeah, thanks for that introduction, Alex, and thank you guys for being on this talk. I'm pretty excited to share what I've learned over the last few years of sort of working with startup teams and working on my own startups. So, quick background, I'm Raahish. I'm the CTO of PurPics, which is a company that helps brands better engage and understand the next generation of consumers. And prior to PurPics, I co-founded two other startups in India, and just throughout my entrepreneurial journey, I've sort of struggled to achieve efficiency in my team, and more candidly put, struggled to get shit done. And it was only my experience working with PurPics that I discovered how founders and how the core team can use certain tools to maximize productivity, motivation, and accountability in startup teams. So that's what this presentation is going to be about, and I hope it resonates with you guys. So I think the problem really is summarized very eloquently, as always, by Alex in his new blog post, which I think you guys should definitely check out. The myriad of roughly defined tasks of ambiguous priority and payoff can keep you in the weeds and working towards your long goals. This is spot on with what happens at startups all the time. There are simply so many things going on at startups that you sort of lose focus of the real goal. And this has happened to me countless times, and I'm sure you guys can also relate to that. So it's really difficult to make sure that your team, which is often minimally compensated in the case of startups, stays focused, motivated, and takes accountability for their work. And this would maximize the productivity of your startup and sort of bridge the strategy execution gap in your company. So how do we do this? Well, at PurPics, we do this with OKRs. I'm sure you guys are familiar with what OKRs are, and if you aren't, perfect. I'll briefly go through that. OKRs stand for objectives and key results. So let's consider a startup, which is like a to-do list app, right? The table here represents a valid objective for them. In this case, the objective for them is becoming the #1 most downloaded productivity app on the App Store, right? So these objectives are meant to be super ambitious and aggressive. Google is one of the companies that, one of the many companies that use OKR, and their management is generally happy if the teams achieve 60% of their objective. So that really goes to show the level of stretch you need in your objectives, right? And the other part, key results. Well, key results are very measurable targets that, if achieved, would lead to the fulfillment of your objective. So in this case, for the app, the key objectives are launch 5 most requested features by December 15th, conduct 10 user tests to identify UX issues, and earn 200 5-star ratings by December 31st. So you might have noticed by these 3, key responsibilities that, A, they are super measurable and quantifiable, and they directly relate with their parent objective. And, you can keep objectives, or you can keep key results super measurable by associating them with key performance indicators or KPIs. So in this case, in the case of the third KR, 5-star ratings, the number of 5-star ratings are a KPI, and the key result is achieving 200 of them. And in some cases, you might find that if your business is early stage or you're working on a new product, sometimes KRs are difficult to quantify. Like, for instance, if you're doing customer discovery, right? How do you quantify customer discovery? Well, in that case, have a time-bound limit or a time factor, as in 2 of these, as in the case of 2 of these KRs. have a deadline for when you want to conclude a certain thing. So for example, your KR could be finish the customer discovery process and conclude on a business model by 1st September, right? So that's a quick run through of what OKRs are. Do you guys have any sort of questions about what I've covered up till now? Cool. So let me talk about the third thing, which a lot of companies use, and we've started using now, is initiatives. So initiatives are basically, tasks that need to be implemented in order to achieve a KR. So these are more detailed and broken down. So they literally take like the vision into an executable strategy. So for example, for the first KR in this case, launch 5 most requested features by December 15th. The initiatives would be further tasks broken down for the tech team, for instance, to sort of, the first task could be identify the 5 most requested features. The second task would be implement the first one, and so on. You get the point. So initiatives really are what bridge the strategy execution gap in startups. And we've started adopting them, and we've found that they really have a good impact. Another thing I want to touch upon is, the cadence for setting OKRs is best done quarterly. And we've sort of come to this cadence because we found that our company objectives and goals are constantly evolving. So it's best to keep revisiting OKRs at every quarter, and even at a more frequent cadence than every quarter. Like team leads are supposed to be revisiting them every week. So I'll come to that later. But yeah, the point is this is very iterative. So now, how do we actually implement OKRs at PurPics? So first of all, like the prerequisite to dividing responsibilities amongst your company is like giving ownership to different people, splitting the company into like different departments, or just assigning responsibilities, or like, broad responsibilities to people. I know a lot of startups don't do that at an early stage. We didn't, when we started out, it was like everyone's doing everything. It was a mess. But we realized that this is super important. And this is like the foundation on which OKRs are built. So the first step really is to start with a broad vision of what the company looks like in a year, right? So talking about PurPics, this is our vision: to become the largest Gen Z influencer platform in the world. That's a very ambitious vision that we want to achieve in the next year, right? So the next step is making a big company level objective that is derived from the vision. So what would it take to achieve that vision? So for instance, in our case, it could be, have 100,000 nano influencers on our platform and hit 500K in ARR, right? So if we achieve these, we'll become the largest Gen Z nano influencer platform in the world. So that objective is sort of distilled from the vision that we start with. The third step is, taking these teams that I mentioned as a prerequisite and letting the team leads think about 3 to 5 objectives that they want to accomplish that will contribute to the company level objective. So in our case, the company level objective was having, X number of influencers and hitting Y revenue, right? So one of the objectives for, let's say, the tech team could be, to automate user acquisition processes with tech tools and integrations. And this sort of would help us increase the number of users, right? And this helps the company level objective. Does that make sense? Cool. So the next step, after you've identified 3 to 5 objectives for your specific team, is to come up with KRs for those objectives. And for every objective, we try to limit the number of KRs to 3 to 5 again. And these are going to be super necessary to achieve that team level objective. So some qualities of really good key results are, it should be high impact. Like I said, even if you achieve 60 to 70% of that KR, like you should be set. But don't think about it when you're like, actually working towards it. This is like, this is for people this is for like the CEOs to think about, right? The other quality is the KR should be very specific, and it should be defined in scope. So when I say that, one of the KRs was, launch 5 most requested features by whatever date, right? So that is super well defined in the scope, and how you make it granular is to link it to KPIs, like I mentioned before. The third thing, which is not very obvious at first, is KRs should be within influence. And when I say that, what I really mean is, these KRs shouldn't be directly in your control. So for instance, for your company, writing 10 blog posts shouldn't be a KR. A better KR is to achieve 100,000 views on your 10 blog posts, right? So 100,000 views isn't directly in your control, but it's within your influence, which is what a good KR should have. Because if it's something that you can control directly, like I can put out 10 blogs, but when your KR is within influence and not directly under your control, what happens is the quality factor of it comes into picture. Like, your blogs are going to be at a certain standard to achieve the results that are going to be caused because of the blogs, right? So it should be in your influence, but not directly in your control, if that makes sense. Yeah, so after these objectives and KRs are drafted out, what we do is generally have like a one-on-one, the team lead with the CEO, to walk through the OKRs and their reasoning. So the reasoning is super important. How do my team level objectives help the company level objective, right? And then of course, these go through revisions. After the revisions are done and the objectives are really solidified, every team, and this is an important step, it might seem minor, but every team lead presents their OKRs to the entire team, even if they're interns. And really why we emphasize on this at PurPics is because it adds a lot of accountability. When you stand up there and when you present to your entire team that your objective is to achieve, or your objective is to become the #1, app in the productivity section on the App Store, like you become accountable for that. And as a team lead, in your company, they automatically, start working towards that because they became more accountable and motivated. And then on a team level, once those OKRs are solidified and presented, then, you start making a list of initiatives, which are, as I said, specific tasks to achieve each KR and relate them or tie them to specific deadlines. And really, this 7-step process is how we take like a vision or a strategy that we began with to like very granular tasks that you need to achieve by a certain date. And that's how you stay on track with startups. So this screen is like a screenshot of actual objectives that the tech team at PurPics has. Of course, the numbers are, I've edited the numbers. But yeah, we're not like super secretive about what we want our tech team to do. So, this is the format that we use. We have a team-wide spreadsheet that is shared, and every department has their own like sub-sheet, right? So, the tech department the tech team has like 3 objectives for this quarter: improving the current platform, like building a new product, and expanding platform capabilities. And then what's important here is like, we give ownership for certain KRs to people, right? And then we track their progress. I'll come to where this comes really useful. So you track the progress of each KR, they build into like your objective fulfillment, and then that sort of, leads into your total fulfillment across objectives. Why the spreadsheet is important is because this is not a one-time thing. Like I said before, when you draft OKRs, startups are very rapidly evolving. Your targets, your vision, your goals might change on like a weekly basis, right? So it's super important to have it down at one place and go back every week to sort of revisit it, to change it. And that's why we at PurPics also have a weekly one-on-one OKR check-in with the CEO or whoever's sort of leading the charge, right? And this is really, you know, to bolster the accountability factor. And I found this to be super useful in all of my startups. The other thing is, and this is like as equally important as like the weekly check-in, is a bi-weekly OKR check-in with all the team leads. So this is not a one-on-one, this is just basically all the team leads across the company talking about updates to their OKRs. And that's where, you know, this sheet comes in. This is what they present off of, you know, what progress have they done with any particular KR, or, you know, how much of their objective is fulfilled. Any changes to the objectives or key results are explained in this meeting so that everyone is in the loop. And again, accountability. The fourth thing, which is not related to OKRs, but I thought to sort of mention as a bonus in this presentation, is really the importance of stand-ups. Like, if you aren't doing it, please start doing a weekly mandatory full team stand-up. And when I say like full team, like every intern or any like person on the team of your startup should be on it. And again, this is super important because every team member needs to be accountable for their work and needs to be presenting what they did in the week and what they're planning to do in the next week to keep people on track. And this is a huge problem with like student founders like me, because, you know, student founders and student startup teams have a lot of other shit going on too. So you need to be kept in check. And finally, at the last day of every quarter, we have a quarterly meeting to present the outcomes of all the objectives, right, across the team. And this is where we evaluate how we did as a team and our shortcomings and what we did well and how we can improve, right, or what we want to take to the next quarter. So this is, again, a super important sort of retrospective meeting. This is like another bonus sheet or template that we use specifically for like the tech team for their stand-up. This is a daily cadence stand-up. This could be weeks, but how we manage it, and I think this might be useful, is like here, like, you know, the rows are for individual people or teams or team leads. And then the sub rows that we have is like, hey, did you finish yesterday's tasks? What were they? If they, like, this is just a yes or no. And the reason this is like binary is because it's really easy to sort of track over time with specific like data types in Excel, right? So that's why we use binary. And again, like every team member inserts a note on this cell to, you know, talk about what tasks they completed, what they couldn't. Big Rock is something that we really learned from Techstars. Big Rock is basically one thing that you want to really get done in that week or in that day that is ambitious, but it would be awesome if you got it done, right? So that Big Rock, every week, you know, you set a Big Rock for yourself, and then at every stand-up, you present whether you've crushed that Big Rock or you haven't, and you justify why. And yeah, the other columns are pretty self-explanatory, but what the point of this is, again, you know, transparency. And because of that transparency, everyone knows what's going on across the team and everyone feels accountable, because you have to stand up there in that meeting and, you know, justify why you didn't or did do certain things to the entire team. And I've seen this to be a very powerful motivator. So, you know, in conclusion, I'd like to say that the goal for all of these tools is really to make sure that everyone on the team knows exactly what they have to do in order to achieve the company vision. Like, there shouldn't be a moment in anyone's day when they're like, I don't really know what to do. Like, you know, I've pretty much done everything. No, you haven't. Like, just go back, look at your OKRs, figure out what KR you haven't achieved, look at the initiatives, and just start doing your stuff. So yeah, OKRs are like a compass or GPS, you know, that take you to your vision or destination. That's how I sort of imagine that in my head. But yeah, that's it from my side. If you guys like, I'm opening this up for discussion now. If you guys have any other questions.